Hi everybody. How's everyone doing? Good, good, good. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. It's a little warm. I wasn't expecting this weather in Sweden this time of year, but I think that's just kind of what's happening all over Northern Europe. Anyway, so I will briefly introduce myself for any of those who don't know me yet. Um, my name is Audra McIver, and I am co-founder of Plan of Attack, which is a boutique PR agency that specializes in video game PR. We launch games, every kind of game, console, mobile, every platform, and we also handle PR for game tech, like engines and stuff like that. So, Plan of Attack has been around for about 5 years. Prior to Plan of Attack, I lived in New York, and I managed the interactive branch of a larger agency there, and worked on um, uh, accounts like Konami, Capcom, Majesco Entertainment, The Sims, stuff like that. But Plan of Attack, we specialize more in the indie game scene. So, without further ado, I have already told you who I am. So let's start off with a few stats. And I've updated the stats this morning. So it's actually quite interesting. Okay, so the most revenue coming from gaming is in China, and then the U.S. is fairly close behind it, which is interesting because China has like 4 times as many people. And then I thought that this was surprising that Japan was number 3. And then Korea is number 4, and then Germany, and then the United Kingdom, and then it goes on and on and on. But it was interesting to me to see how important, especially China and Japan and Korean markets are. It's definitely something to consider when you're kind of conceptualizing games and stuff. Maybe do some research there to see what kind of games people are playing there and stuff like that, and then, so that you can kind of try to get into that market. It's good to know which are the biggest markets always. Um, so this is a graph that has the the different platforms. So mobile obviously is gaining in popularity, faster than anything else. PC games and console games are pretty steady. And I think that with the mobile games, one of the reasons that these games are so popular is because that's what they're playing in Japan and China. I just got back from Japan, and everyone is playing mobile games there that I noticed. This is just another graph that just kind of shows the market share of these. And I'm happy to give my presentation to anyone if you want to check out some of these graphs. They're all from Newzoo research. Okay, what are people playing on? And this again shows the different segments. The casual web games has the smallest segment. TV console VR is pretty steady. It starts to wane a little bit as we move into next year, or it's forecasted to wane a little bit as we move into next year. I was quite surprised at how many PC games there actually are being played, because I feel like mobile is kind of taking over a little bit, and then also Steam is really a saturated marketplace. So it's a very saturated market, obviously. So this is what we recommend to kind of avoid it. All right. Product positioning. You need to know what kind of a game you are launching. It's basically you need to know what kind of game you're launching because you need to know who your audience is and where your market is so that you can kind of gear more of your efforts toward that. It's a really big fragmented market, and everything is global now with the games industry. So you really need to know who your players are going to be. And in order to do that, you need to know what kind of a game you are making. How do I find it and why do I need it? So this is how you find your product positioning. You benchmark features and compare. So you have a meeting with your team, sit down, say, what makes my game special? Why are people going to want to play it? And then you kind of everyone involved gives a couple of features that they think are really unique and cool. And then you compare and contrast those features with other games that are available on the market to make sure that you have a unique enough angle. And then what you also need to do is you need to be able to sum up your game, what you're offering in a sentence. You need to know who your audience is. You need to know who your target markets, where your target markets are, and you need to know why those are your target markets. Because if you're if you're making a JRPG, say, well, I want to launch this game in Japan, so you have to know your audience and you have to know your target market. You should also make sure that when you start conceptualizing your game, you have to already start thinking about how you're going to market your game. Because that really starts from day one. You obviously are not going to be doing press outreach or anything like that, but you need to start thinking about how you're going to market your game so that you kind of build that into your development schedule. And it also helps with community building. Community is really, really important. I'll get to that in a little bit, but the community building should start when you start conceptualizing your game as well. And that goes along with your product positioning, because you need to know where your community is going to come from. And then always plan ahead, but know that deviation will happen. I mean, very, very rarely do. I think almost never have I launched a game that launches on the exact day that they've said is going to launch on from the beginning of the development cycle. So delays are going to happen, bugs are going to happen, things are going to break, and you need to make sure that you pad your timeline adequately to prepare for that. Okay, so a 30-second elevator pitch. Basically, after you know what kind of game you're making, if you know who your target market is, who your audience is, you've started building your community, you need to have all of that in a clear, concise, very quick pitch. If you have, just a brief period of time to pitch your game, say, to a publisher or something, you have to know exactly what it is, and it has to be clear. Otherwise, it can sound like you're mimicking another game or something like that. So that's very important. Okay, so community. Let me see. All right, community is extremely important. It's almost more important than game reviews and stuff like that. Although those are important, but your communities are going to be the ones that buy your game. They're going to be the ones that talk to their friends about your game, and that's kind of how you're going to spread that organic growth. You need to pay attention to your community, and you need to listen to them and be really responsive to them. If they feel ignored, they'll leave and go play another game. If you pay attention to them and you respond to them and you interact with them and engage them and everything, they feel important, and then they feel more loyal. So they're going to continue to come back and play your game, and then they're going to talk about it to other people as well. So it's very important, and that's something you should start thinking about, how you're going to build your community right from day one. Okay, so also with community, sometimes you're going to get nasty trolls. And this is just part of life today. They're not going to go away. But there are a few ways that you can deal with trolls so that it can downsize a situation instead of escalating a situation. So be diplomatic and factual. Don't fight fire with fire when it comes to trolls, because that's what they want. They love that. That if there's more drama, then that's all the better. So you be diplomatic, be really nice, take the high road, be factual. And be honest as well. But be honest with a grain of salt. So if you've made a mistake or something like that, and you have people trolling you and stuff, just be honest, take the high road, and don't feed into it because that's really what they want, and that will make a situation go from bad to really, 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 really bad very quickly. Also, if you have a troll, hopefully you've been building your community and nurturing your community and everything, and if that's the case, then your community become kind of like evangelists for you, and they will jump in and fight your battle for you against the troll, and that's really ideally what you want. Obviously, you have to moderate all of the back and forth and everything because it can get really nasty, and you don't want to be associated with that. You just want to have you just want to take the high road. I've been trolled before, and it really, really sucks. Okay, also, you need video content for your game. So this is something that you want to have a really good quality trailer, at least one good quality trailer. I would say send it out with your game announcement. Let's see, I think, okay. It has to be a very high quality video content, and the sound has to be good. So a mistake that I see a lot of times with indie games, indie studios, when they make a trailer, is they try to do like a voiceover with the trailer. And voiceover is really, really tricky. So you have to really be very careful and find either hire a company who specializes in making trailers, or find somebody who will at least like be really honest with you about it and knows what they're talking about. I've seen some trailers go really bad, and mainly just because of the voiceover, because the voiceover can sound really, really hokey if it's not done right. So if in doubt, just don't do a voiceover. Just have music. That's perfectly acceptable in 9 cases out of 10. The content should be compelling. And so this is another thing that you can do if you have the resources. You can create like a video developer diary because so years ago, these all used to be written. Now no one's going to read that much text. So now you can just do it like a video developer diary video, and depending on what kind of a game you have that you're working on, you can focus on different aspects of the game, focus on, interviewing different team members, something like that. And that's something that really is most important for your community because it makes you more relatable. It makes people feel like they know you a little bit more, and then they care about you and they have loyalty. And but you have to have video content now because people just don't read anymore, unfortunately. So videos are very important. I would say through a course of a campaign, depending on what kind of a game you are launching, I would say plan to have at least 2 or 3 trailers. And then if you have the resources and want to do like a developer diary video sequence or something like that, it's also a really, really good way to build your community and make you more relatable. Okay, so influencers are extremely important now. I definitely think that traditional media is still very important, and influencers, well, I mean, they have the most influence. So when you're working with influencers, and you probably already know this, but I'm going to say it again just in case. Find out, because you know your product positioning, you know who your target market is, you know what kind of a game you're making and who your audience is going to be. You've been building your community. So do your homework on the influencers. Find out which influencers are playing games of a similar genre to what you've made. And then go after those influencers and say, hey, I noticed you did a video about this, so I thought you might like this. It's more relatable, and it shows that you've actually put in some effort, which goes a long way. That actually goes a long way with traditional press as well. You don't want to pitch a traditional press or an influencer with something that they obviously have no interest in, like this kind of genre. It's a waste of their time, it's a waste of your time, and it's very off-putting. So do your homework on influencers especially. Also, when working with influencers, they are not traditional press. They don't like they a lot of times they will adhere to embargoes, but they don't have the same kind of integrity, like journalistic integrity, to adhere to embargoes as traditional press do. So just I would say if you're working with influencers, especially if you have a game that has like a twist or something like that, I would recommend either creating a separate build for influencers if you want influencer coverage before you launch the game. I would say make a separate build for the influencers that doesn't give away all of the secrets. Something else that we do with influencers is that we wait until a day or two before launch to actually pitch them out. Whereas with traditional press, we send them the final review code up to 2 weeks before launch, and then embargo all of that coverage until the day of launch. Traditional press, I mean, sometimes they break embargo, but most of the time they don't. But influencers, they just don't care as much. I mean, they care, but it's just different. But if you wait until right before the game launch to send your game out to influencers, then you should be fine, even if they do post a video or something immediately. Okay, so and also with streamers, brand partnerships are available, but they can and you need a budget for those, and the prices range from not so expensive to outrageously expensive. So it's something that if you have a budget, you can look into doing a brand partnership with an influencer, but just make sure that if you do that, make sure that it's someone who, again, likes the kind of game that you're selling. They like the genre. They just do your homework, especially if you're going to pay for a brand partnership. Make sure that you do your homework and that it's not just their audience. It's that they actually will enjoy the game, because otherwise it looks like it was bought, and that's a little bit of a turnoff. It kind of defeats the purpose of working with an influencer anyway. When you're developing your game, make sure that you look at what's going on outside of your little circle. Don't get tunnel vision and only think about your game, because if you do that, then you don't know what else is out there on the market. You don't know if you've essentially created the exact same game as something else that's out there. And it's very easy. I've seen a lot of developers, because you care a lot about the games that you're making. So I've seen a lot of developers, it becomes like a child or something. So you have to make sure that you get critical feedback and from a wide variety of people. Ask your friends, ask colleagues, ask other fellow games industry people for feedback, and be open to the feedback. But it makes a really big difference, because it's the difference between having a really unique, cool product or essentially launching a clone when you thought you came up with it on your own. Okay, early access. So I go back and forth on early access, on whether or not I recommend games to launch on early access, because I've seen it work and I've seen it not work. So I'm just going to give you the facts about early access, and then oftentimes it just really depends on your game if it's going to work or not. So early access is providing a stable but not completely final build of your game. It's very good for gathering constructive feedback from the community, and it's very good for building community as well. And it's a good way to kind of supplement your funding for the project. If you're you have something playable, it's a pretty good stable build, but you need just that last little bit of funding. It can help with that as well. It is not an excuse to upload an unstable, buggy game to the public because you ran out of budget. So if the game is not stable, if it's broken or something like that, don't put it on early access, because you're going to ruin early access for everyone else, and you've blown your chance to ever create a good game if it's not stable, if it's broken or something. You're never going to get those players back. It's not a guarantee of success. If the game is not, if it's really just not a good product and you've uploaded it just for the hell of it or because you've run out of budget, you will get negative feedback and that will come back to haunt you. And you can't really, once you have that like attitude out there towards your game, it's really just difficult to overcome that. You have to really do something major or a complete revamp or something like that. It's not easy revenue. If you launch a game on early access, you have to continue to be very active with updates, communicating with the community. And yeah, you need to make sure that you are constantly updating, and that needs to be regular. It can't be sporadic because then you start to lose your community and they start to not trust you. So you need to, before you launch a game on early access, you need to have a roadmap that is a reasonable roadmap that you can get to with whatever updates, fixes, DLC, anything like that. And it's not a means of getting instant visibility with press. A lot of the big outlets won't even cover early access games because a lot of the bigger outlets don't do previews anymore just because there's just so much market saturation. So this is not a way that you're instantly going to get, IGN to cover your game. Or Eurogamer. Eurogamer is, those outlets, they really don't do preview coverage anymore. So an early access game is essentially a preview. You'll see it called early access review, preview, something like that. It all means the same thing. It's not a final game, so it's not a final review. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying before about padding your development schedule with extra time because things will go wrong. And so just plan on it. And don't ever give a launch date announcement for your game pretty much until you have the game finalized because yes, that happens all the time. Things get pushed back all the time. And if that does happen, if you do have to push back your game, be honest with the community about it. We did this for Pillars of Eternity 2 earlier this year, and the community was actually great because we basically had to delay the launch by a month, and we just came out and said, look, we're still polishing and fixing, and so it's just going to take a little bit more time before we give you the product that you deserve. And the community was great about it. So just be honest and transparent with your community and players. Also, you should definitely attend trade events. Trade events are a great way to not only network within the games industry, but they're also a great way to see your players directly as well. Obviously, there are different types of trade events. There are B2B or B2C. This picture on the right here is from Gamescom. How many of you guys have been to Gamescom? Yeah. So this actually is a light day at Gamescom. It is really, really crazy. So basically, at the big consumer shows, you're going to be late for everything. You're going to have too much awful food, and you're going to drink too much. And that's just the way that it goes. But it's very important to go to conferences and commingle with your fellow games industry people, and also, just get your game out there. And if it's a consumer show like PAX East or Gamescom, something like that, there are ways that you can kind of join in with an indie booth or something like that to actually have your game on the show floor where players can play it. The other thing to note about conferences is if you're showing your game to press, especially huge consumer shows like Gamescom and stuff like that, make sure that you also have a way of showing your game in the business hall, because pretty much if you are only showing it on the consumer show floor, the press are not going to be able to get to it. So it's good to kind of figure out what the layout is going to be. Okay, press kit is very, very important. Press kit should have all video content. we've even started including in press kits like GIFs instead of just static screenshots, but I think that you should have both. Logos, high quality logos, a fact sheet, and any press releases or anything like that should be included in the press kit. And it should be easily accessible on your website. It should not be something that is hard to find because the press are going to go and they're going to look for it and they don't want to root around on your site to find it. Okay, so with screenshots as well, you want to make sure that you have compelling screenshots. Too much open space is kind of boring. So you want to make sure that you have a lot of action in the screenshots. Obviously, you're going to have you're going to have parts like that in your game, but why would you show that if you only have like 10 screenshots in your press kit? Why would that be one of them? Make sure that it has a lot of action, it has excitement, there's not a lot of wasted space, you can actually see movement, you can see action, whereas this, it just looks like you're running through a tundra. Which you will be doing in a game, but that's not the best way to show. Okay. Mock reviews are actually really important. So basically what a mock review is it's a journalist, a video game journalist that has retired from journalism and they now write mock reviews. So usually costs around €1,000 or something to get a mock review, but what they do is they play the game and they write a very honest review of your game. And you are the only one that is ever going to see that review. It's not going to be published. So this is a good way to, if you get a mock review early in development, it's a good way to figure out any weaknesses that your game might have conceptually and fix it. And if you do a mock review towards the end of development, if it's too late to fix any of the issues or whatever, at least you know what the press is going to say. The mock reviewers that we work with always come in like right at what the review scores are. So these guys do know what they're talking about. And it's just a nice way to. I would recommend, if you have the budget to do only one mock review, I would recommend doing it like, I don't know, maybe right around beta, something like that, like when you still have time to fix some stuff in your game, because yeah, otherwise if you've developed it in a vacuum or something like that, you may not notice that some of the issues that there are with the game. Okay, so I thought about pulling this slide out because it's very basic, but the reason I left it in is because it's a cookie cutter game launch. But now I think that when you're working on marketing your game, you want to really get creative and you want to really do a lot of research and kind of create a bespoke campaign for your game. Obviously, you need to announce it. I would say announce with a really high quality trailer. Announce the game. Don't say when it's going to come out. You can be vague about that. You can say Q1 2019, next summer, something like that. Be vague because you want to give yourself time to, I don't know, basically fix things that will go wrong. If it's for preview, it just has to be a certain kind of a game. So it has to be. And you want to do previews, like if you launch it on early access, you can do a preview campaign then. But you don't want the game to be too finalized when you're doing a preview campaign, because then you won't be able to get those journalists to review your game because they've already played it. And if not that much has changed, then they're not going to play it again. They're going to play something else. Launch date announcement. This is when you pretty much your game is almost done and you know that you can launch on a certain day. You know that you can deliver the product. And the launch date announcement, usually we send out basically when we have review code in hand. So we send out the launch date announcement with a note to press to request review code from us. And that works quite well. It also... and that kind of kicks off the review campaign, and you all of those reviews should be under embargo with the press, and again, with the influencers, pitch them kind of like closer to the launch date. Also, do research on your launch date. Don't launch on the same day that some huge game is coming out. You're not going to get any press, and sometimes it's unavoidable because sometimes things launch when you don't expect it. But you know, a little bit of effort can actually help a lot in the end, because if you wait a week, it might mean the difference between tons of visibility for your game and none at all. So the review campaign starts around 2 weeks before launch, and it goes all the way up to like a month after launch, because sometimes you just have to follow up with the press a lot of times to get them to review your game, because they just have so many. They get like up to 80 emails a day with news announcements and things like that. So they just are very, very busy. So you want to be considerate of that and give them a lot of time to play your game, and you know, don't aggressively follow up with them like every single day, but a nice little, you know, a nudge every week or something is totally acceptable. And then on the day of launch, you send out the now available announcement. And I would say with the announcement and then with the now available announcement, if you have budget for 2 trailers, those are the 2 times to send out the trailer. You have a launch trailer and you have an announcement trailer. And yeah, sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought. So yeah, with the now available announcement, and then if you have DLC coming after or updates or anything like that, then that's just going to be a media alert that you distribute as you have that ready. And that can be a really good way to kind of pull people back into your game or remind people about your game, something like that. You need to have something newsworthy. You can't, if it's just a simple bug fix or something like that, it's not really going to be that interesting. It's still good to keep your community updated about all of that stuff, but in terms of being newsworthy, like it's a good rule of thumb when you're trying to figure out what is newsworthy and what is not newsworthy in your game is to think about if you would read it and find it interesting or not. You know, but a lot of times people aren't going to find it interesting to, I don't know, to read that such and such bug was fixed or something like that. The press are the same. So anyway, but you keep your community updated with all of that stuff, of course. And that is pretty much my talk. But I did want to leave a lot of time for questions, because I always get a lot of questions when I do my marketing presentations. Are there any questions? I know exactly why you're asking me this. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I think if you're in the middle of a launch, you should probably just go ahead and launch. And then if something happens like what happened with you in particular, I think that kind of the way that you guys did it was the best way to handle that situation, because once you've started once you've announced the game, or once you've launched the game, once the game is available to play, then it's really too late to go back and say, oh, sorry, I take it all back. You'll lose your entire community. But it also, if something like that happens, then when you have a big update or something like that, maybe like new DLC, I don't know, a seasonal theme, something like that, then you can announce that and kind of play that up a little bit. But yeah, I mean, once you've started to launch your game, once it's already available, it's kind of too late to take it back. So, any other questions? Over. Oh.
Yeah. If we go back to early access, because one of the most important things of early access that I've noticed are that it's very easy for developers to give promises. If we look at things like on overgrowth, where they promise so many things, and then 6 years later, it's barely been done anything. So that's just one of the things that you didn't touch upon, I don't think, that I think is very important, to like don't make promises that you can't keep.
Yes.
And explicitly keep early access to something that you know that you don't have to make any promises for it to be launched. You have your community and you have your game and you say that we're going to work on this, but you don't give them any very explicit promises on that, because that seems to be very...
It's definitely a way to piss off your community.
Yeah.
For sure. And then you lose players. I mean, you're spot on, because it's better to... What is it? It's better to underpromise and overdeliver than overpromise and underdeliver. So if you can have a lot of like cool ideas for features in your game, but if you're not sure if you can execute those or not, just don't say anything. It's pretty easy. It's much easier to do that than to make a promise and then renege. And I mean, I'm sure you guys have all known games that have done this, and the backlash is real, and it just pisses off your community. Don't piss off your community. They're on your team. They want you to succeed as well. Any other questions? Daniel?
Hey, Audra. Thanks for a great talk.
Hello.
What do you believe has changed in games marketing in the last couple of years?
I mean, a ton of stuff has changed. It's constantly changing. The battle royale genre has taken over. It was a few years ago, it was more zombie games, and now it's more battle royale games. But that's going to always be the case. We're always going to have like rise and fall and trends, gaming trends and stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, I guess like VR is still emerging, but as you know, we're still having the issue with market penetration with the headsets and stuff. So I think that is slowly gaining in popularity. But I mean, basically, I think the biggest changes are just the different markets that are emerging, and the fact that so many games now are mobile. Like I actually like, if a mobile game isn't kind of a core gaming experience, we really won't even take it on as a client, because it's just so hard to get press, and it's really hard to move the needle for that type of a game. For like a casual mobile titles or something like that. But when I was in Japan, I mean, I saw people everywhere playing mobile games, and they were like core games. They weren't even casual, match 3 games or something like that. So I think mobile gaming is definitely something that you should consider when you're coming up with a concept for your game. And maybe maybe it's a direct port to mobile from like a PC game or something like that, or maybe it's just like a component that you can play along with the game. But it's a cool thing to kind of think about integrating that into your overall game, just because that is a way to reach players, a bigger market players, I guess I'd say. Any other questions in the back there?
Yeah, so you mentioned you wanted to find influencers that play the kind of games that you're making, and there's a sea of influencers out there. Is there a practical way to find these people without going through like thousands of hours of Twitch and YouTube?
Well, if you know your product, if you have your idea of what your game is, you'll kind of have a little bit of an idea of what genre it is, maybe what platform it is. Just Google that genre and see what pops up. And that's, I mean, it does take a while, but that's the easiest way to kind of at least get straight to it. If you have an RPG or like a real-time strategy game or something like that, just Google that and see or Google the genre with like the word review or something after it, and then you'll see which journalists and which influencers that pops up with, and then you can start there. And that's at least a good place to start. And then you can start doing outreach and still do research and still look for additional places where you can, additional influencers and stuff that are playing those types of games. But at least then you can start outreach and you have a place to start. So you don't have to wait until you have a full list together before you start pitching people. Anyone else?
Hello. Thanks for the talk, by the way.
You're welcome.
No, so I was thinking about like the mobile market. It seems that there's coming up new generations would have completely different relationship to the mobile as a gaming device.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that will affect like upcoming games and like the market, the mobile market? Like I'm not even a mobile developer, but
So
it's
how do I'm sorry, could you say?
so in short, like how do you see? Can we skip the mic maybe?
Yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't seem to
So
like you.
How do you see that the mobile market will change because of the new generations that have a different relationship to a phone as a gaming device?
So how is the mobile gaming market going to change? Like, I mean, I think that it's just gonna, and with technology advances as well, I think that it's just gonna become more like a platform, you know, and then that's really where everyone is gonna get all of their content. I mean, I think that it's just it just kind of pinpoints that it's a very important sector to pay attention to, because it is the new generation that's coming up. They're absolutely glued to their mobile devices, so you need to consider that if you want to reach that market. And again, it doesn't mean that you have to make a casual mobile game or anything like that. You know, you need to understand the technology and what you can do on a mobile device, and then make it as a part of your game or something like that, and then at least you can get, you still are appealing to the core gamers on console and PC, but then you're also able to access the people who are playing games on their mobile phones. I don't see that growth in the mobile gaming sector slowing down at all. So there's
What kind of games are easy to market for, and what kind of games are hard to market for?
Okay, so this is a good question, actually. Really casual games are very, very hard to market because there's not really a lot more than talking about the mechanics. I definitely think that you should announce even those games to make sure that people are aware of them, but much easier games that are easier to market are games that are a little bit deeper, have a lot of different components. If it's a known IP, then that's really easy. If it's not, if you're building the IP and as well as building the game, then it's a little bit harder. But typically, games that are just that have a lot of depth are easier to market because the traditional press have a lot to write about with it. And it also is easier because then you can kind of develop a full video program where you talk about different features in the game, or if it's a trailer, you maybe introduce a new character or something and you can feature that character in the trailer. So really, just the super ultra casual games are quite difficult to market. I would recommend still announcing them, but you're not really going to get reviews or anything. And if it's too casual, it's not really interesting for an influencer to play either. So when you're thinking about that, and and especially pitching influencers and stuff like that. Think about if your gameplay mechanics are something interesting to watch on a video stream. Would you watch it on a video stream? Would your friends watch it on a video stream? If so, then you can pitch influencers. But if it's just a match 3 game or something, then it's just hard to get a lot of attention for that. Not to say that's not a huge sector, but still, it's more difficult to market for sure. Over here. It should be, well, it depends. It should kind of be focused on all of the above, but if you have the budget to make more than one trailer, then you can, kind of maybe focus it a little bit different. In a trailer, you really want to give a little bit of the story, and you also want to show the gameplay mechanics. So you want to give it just enough so that people see it and want more. I mean, it's just like a movie trailer, right? It's, you want to know a little bit about the story. You want to know what kind of an experience you're signing up for. So, and you should make a trailer should be exciting and action-packed. I mean, think about movie trailers, and kind of apply that to the way that you're coming up with the concept for a game trailer, for a gameplay trailer. And I definitely think that gameplay trailers are much more important than cinematic trailers for video games now as well, and a lot cheaper. Anyone else? Oh, yes.
Have you worked with like indie developers with almost nothing to their name? And if so, like, how and what is the hardest part for them to build up a community?
So building a community, I mean, if you're completely unknown, which a lot of indie developers are, the best way to go about building up your community is to, again, kind of look to the communities of other games that are kind of similar to yours. In genre, maybe some of the gameplay mechanics are similar, something like that. Look at those communities and pay attention to what those companies are doing as well. Join those communities, see what they're doing, see how they're keeping their community engaged and stuff like that. And then you can kind of take some of those practices and implement them yourself. In terms of like getting like over that first step of starting, like getting your first community member or something like that. Ask your friends, ask them to ask their friends. Social media is a great way to kind of like get over the threshold. And then once you have started building your community, and once you have even a few community members, then you implement those community building strategies that you have hopefully gleaned from watching what other companies are doing. Like when you see a game with a really active community, join the community and pay attention to what they're doing and basically steal their idea. I mean, it's not exactly like that because obviously each game is different. So you're not really stealing their ideas, but you are being influenced by what they're doing, which seems to be working. And in doing that, you're basically implementing tactics that you find engaging. Because if you're part of this community and you see that and you like what they're doing, then obviously you can do that. You can do similar things and nurture your own community. So, but yeah, in terms of like just getting over that first hump of getting the community, I would say definitely just reach out to people on social media and stuff like that and just say, hey, will you check out this game? It's good to have like maybe a trailer, a video, some kind of visual content, so that to give people an idea of what it is that they're signing up for. And then it kind of can grow organically from there. But visual content is really important. As well as knowing what your mission is and having a clear, Oops. Sorry about that. Any other questions? Well, Kickstarter is not news anymore. It really, I think Kickstarter is a great way to get feedback. First of all, if your game passes your Kickstarter, then you know that you've got a community already. So it's actually good for community building and stuff. But it's from a strictly press perspective, it's really not news. The press aren't gonna cover your game, and just because it's a Kickstarter. If you have any kind of a build or anything, like you want to pool all of the assets that you can together so that you have something visual to show. But in terms of just the Kickstarter, it's really hard to get press to play it or pay attention unless it's a big IP. In which case, sometimes you don't even need to do a Kickstarter. But it's also a useful tool for getting feedback on your concept. Kind of a proof of concept. If you pass the Kickstarter, then obviously you're onto something. You're onto something that people want to play. So I would say Kickstarter, it's not newsworthy, but it is still useful. It can still be useful in terms of getting feedback on your concept and in terms of building your community as well. Anyone else? All right, I think we are done with questions.
Yes, something.